Well, hello to all of our returning VITA volunteers. My name is Jim Simpson, and on behalf of the Central Arizona VITA Network, the City of Phoenix, and Masters of Coin, we are presenting a series of videos for returning volunteers. And this series is based on live sessions that Gene King and I have done for the City of Phoenix. They address various topics, kind of a deeper dive into some of the topics that are geared towards our returning volunteers. In this video, we're going to talk about quality review. And this video is geared towards those volunteers who have 1 or 2 years of service or more and would like to start doing quality reviews. So we're going to attempt to share some best practices and give you an example of what a quality review might look like. The example review we do at the end of this session will use scenario 7 from the 2024 test booklet, Form 6744. We'll use scenario 7, all the facts and the documents from that, and then we'll show the return. And I'll give the example of how I would review that return. And we will put links to PDF pages so that you could open those up. So as I go review the return, you can kind of review it with me if you like. Okay. So with that, let me share a presentation. I'm going to go over a few slides of just basic concepts of quality review, and then I'm going to go through. When we did the live sessions, Gene and I actually did this as a live presentation of a quality review where I portrayed the reviewer and Gene portrayed the client. Of course, I don't have the luxury of that, but I'm going to try to go over the same return with you and show you how at least I would do a quality review. And when I say that, that's important because as one of my site coordinators so astutely said, quality review is more of an art than a science. And so I'm going to show you how I approach it. That's not the only way to do it, but it will at least demonstrate some of the principles we're going to cover in here. So let me share my screen. And so here we're going to look at, these are what we call refresher sessions for returning volunteers. And this one is on conducting quality reviews. So the purpose of a quality review is to make sure we do an accurate return. That's the bottom line of this. And so in order to do that, we need to be sure we're tackling all of the questions that are on the form 13614C. That's the intake and interview form. And then we also look at the documents that are provided by the taxpayer. We interview the taxpayer. Now, the preparers interviewed them, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't also do that. And then we look at what was input into the software. So we review information from the source documents, from the intake and interview form, from maybe the prior year tax return, and also an interview with the taxpayer. All of these go into making a good quality review. This isn't just a proofreading exercise. We're not just trying to proofread what the preparer has put in. And it's not a silent review. We actually sit with the taxpayer. And oftentimes, if the site permits, if the security and privacy of the sites permit, I turn my screen to the client and we go over things together. I want to make sure that they understand what's on their tax return that they're signing for. We don't allow it. Sometimes you'll have the tax preparer sitting with you doing that. Oftentimes it's not the case, but if they are, we don't let them lead the process, and neither do we necessarily let the client lead the process. We're the one leading the process of quality review. We're repeating all the steps, except we're not entering any data, except maybe if we have to fix something or other. We do conduct an interview. We especially look at, has anything changed since last year? Now, that requires that, well, it's best if we have their last year's tax return with them. We always suggest to taxpayers that they bring the last year's tax return. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. But if we have that, we want to compare. Did anything really change? Was there a change in refund? And of course, the client's going to let you know that right away. And that's one of the purposes that we want to do from here is we want the client walking away and understanding what might have changed in that. Um, we're going to proofread the tax forms, and when I show you the how I approach the quality review, I'll show you how I review those forms. What are some common errors and reasons for rejects? One is there might have the incorrect withholding. We might have inputted in, or it was reported differently, or whatever. If maybe we didn't review the intake form with the client properly, for instance, their filing status. If we don't interview them, maybe we get the wrong filing status. Here are the common rejects that we get is, hey, we maybe transposed a number on the Social Security when we input that. That's why we definitely want to check that. Here's one of the big ones we started getting in the last year or two is IP pins. IRS has started issuing IP pins, or sometimes they opened it up to where the taxpayer can request an IP pin. And sometimes these clients, they get the letter every year, it changes. And that may be one thing that they're not aware of. And they get these letters in the mail from IRS saying, oh, we've assigned you an IP pin. They've heard of all of these scams about pin numbers, and they just throw the letter away without doing it. And or if they've been one to request an IP pin, they only get the letter the first year. Then succeeding years, of course, if they've requested an IP pin, they have to have an irs.gov account. And if they've got the irs.gov account, in the second and succeeding years, they've got to go log on to get their IP pin. And some of them just aren't aware of that. So when we're interviewing the taxpayer, we want to make sure that if they have an IP pin, that they've gone and gotten that. Sometimes we'll miskey the employer identification number. Uh, and IRS, the computers do check that against the W-2s that we're inputting. And sometimes we'll get that. So we need to really confirm that those are correct. And then here's another big one we're getting these days is if there was a missing 1095A. Last year, the intake and interview form said, hey, did you get insurance through the Affordable Care Act? And they marked no. But then when you talk to them and you said, well, look, did you get insurance through the marketplace or the exchange or Obamacare? Oh, yeah, I got that. Then they should have brought with them a 1095A because we have to reconcile the numbers on that. This was a big thing and there was also some fraud going on with this. There were insurance brokers that were taking out policies in a taxpayer's name. These were unscrupulous insurance brokers, but they were taking out policies, collecting a commission, and the taxpayer never even knew that a policy was taken out in their name. So anyway, those are some of the main things. There is in your publication 4012 under tab K, there's kind of a quality review checklist that you could kind of go by. So I wanted to give you this source of doing it. But let's talk about some of the benefits. I've got a few slides here that talk about the benefits to the taxpayer, the benefits to the site, the benefits to the organization, the benefits to the IRS and that. So these are benefits to the taxpayer. If we do this correctly, they're going to get a timely refund. It prevents IRS notices and contacts from the IRS. Nobody likes to get a notice from the IRS, even if it's just a simple kind of thing to correct, right? They're worded, confusingly, if that's a word. They're confusing to the taxpayer. They're confusing to us sometimes, trying to sort out what is it that they're looking for. And of course, if there were errors, that can be really stressful to the tech client. If we're Doing good quality review, we're going to calculate the correct tax. We're going to avoid any underpayment tax with interest and possible penalties. We're going to make sure that they get all of the credits and or deductions that they're entitled to. And it increases confidence. And even most importantly, look at this last one. It enhances taxpayer understanding of their tax return. You know, so many clients, when I get done reviewing, they're grateful that I've helped them understand what their tax return is about. So it's very satisfying. What are some of the benefits to the volunteer? It reduces the tax preparer anxiety knowing that somebody else is going to recheck their work and make sure that there isn't a mistake. If we can give them positive feedback, it increases their confidence. It's on-the-job training that builds valuable skills. It raises their morale and it fosters teamwork, because uh, we want to encourage the preparers. I mean, don't be afraid to ask questions, either from your peers or from the site coordinator. Our whole goal is to get an accurate tax return. That's all we want. Benefits to the site, it reduces e-file reject rates. And yes, IRS does monitor the reject rates that we get. Now, luckily, I would say all of our sites within the Phoenix metropolitan area, and we've got many, we have many organizations that provide VITA services, but we have a very good record for doing this. So this is good. Um, it ensures compliance with the 10 quality site requirements. When IRS reviews our sites, they're looking to see, did we follow all those QSRs, those quality site requirements? It promotes a good reputation with the community that we're serving the sites, increases productivity. You know, some of you may have had to go back and amend returns, and it's a pain. It's just so much easier to get it done right the first time than to have to fix it. It improves volunteer confidence and retention. They come back. They actually have fun doing this when we're doing it right. And they come back. Increases the taxpayer confidence in the site's ability to prepare a complete and accurate tax return. What are benefits to the VITA TCE program? It promotes positive publicity. It creates a good positive reputation and confidence. It promotes the public perception about the quality of what we do in a VITA site. And it also allows feedback to, the software providers so that they can so that they can enact some positive enhancements to the software. Um, what are some consequences of a poor quality review? Well, we've already mentioned that no one enjoys receiving notices from the IRS. They're stressful for everyone. They're for the taxpayer when the taxpayer's trying to get them to us. And this is usually in the off season. The site coordinators aren't that involved, but hey, we have to fix them. We've got to address these things. And the taxpayer could face an undue hardship if we prepare a return that's got a wrong um, refund that's on it and it overpays them. They've got to pay it back. You know, face it, these folks that we're dealing with, many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. They get this refund. They've paid off their Christmas bills or whatever on their credit cards. They don't have the money to pay it back. Plus, there's interest and penalties. So it's really important we do a good quality review. And we don't want them to miss out on any credits either. So what are some of the challenges of being a good quality reviewer? Well, telling somebody that he or she made a mistake can be difficult, embarrassing, and we need to do it in a kind way and in a way that says, hey, we're all in this together. And I will be the first one to say, I've been doing this for 35 years and I still make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And it's like we've got to kind of do it. It's like we're all in this together. We're just trying to get an accurate return. Sometimes quality reviewers, they've got to deal with difficult tax issues. And, it helps develop your research skills. You've really got to dive in and look to make sure. We don't know, nobody knows everything, and oftentimes here's really one of the bad parts is we just need to know how to look it up and sometimes how to say no to an out of scope return. We go look this up and we realize, hey, we're not supposed to be doing this. We're not trained to do it. We're not covered under the Volunteer Protection Act. We need to send these folks to a paid tax preparer. And that can be awkward. Um, Sometimes experienced preparers don't like to be reviewed. We have many preparers, they've been in here for 15 years and they don't feel like they need a review. I've been doing it for 35 years and I wouldn't want a return going out the door that hadn't been reviewed. Okay, we all make mistakes, but sometimes, dealing with these preparers can be a little bit of difficulty and awkward, and it takes a little bit of finesse. As I said, conscientious preparers generally appreciate that somebody has their back. Doing quality reviews is a pretty big responsibility. Not all of our preparers want to do it, but um, I will tell you, they learn more. They become better preparers by being reviewers. So um, the quality reviewer is generally the last person to look things over before the return's filed. The site coordinator wouldn't ask you to do this if they didn't think you could do the job. And that is true. Um, we also, at least in my sites, we kind of have specialties, of education credits or military things or that. And sometimes we have designated reviewers that when we put them up on the board that they're ready for review and we'll say, hey, we want this person doing the review, so that we do. So how do you give quality feedback to the preparer? This isn't an I gotcha moment, right? And you need to do this in a kind way. You need to do it in a helpful way. You should explain the issue using specific examples. It's helpful to me when you change an unsure question to a yes or no. Or, now we have these new intake forms with the right-hand side with the gray areas, and we might want to say, it's helpful if you really mark off that you've addressed all of these issues or at least considered addressing them. You know, Granted, you know what I'm talking about, that gray area on the right-hand side of the questionnaires. Maybe we don't need to ask every single question of the taxpayer. If they're 70 years old, and they're retired, we probably don't ask them if they received any cash tips, right? But at least we want to mark it off that we've considered it, right? That we've actually done a thorough interview. Never embarrass the preparer. If you need to, pull them aside privately and talk to them. If they've got significant errors, find something good, make a positive comment, and then address the errors. Um, here are every return must be quality reviewed, and here are a couple of methods that most sites do. They either do designated review, where there's going to be specific volunteers who do quality review. On one of my sites, the site coordinator, he reviews every return that's being done there, and he's very good at it. You know, it other ones will want to do peer reviews. I tend to prefer this, to where we train everybody that can to do quality review. So that way it keeps the site moving. There's no backup. Uh, there's no backup, and our clients aren't having to wait so long. But peer reviews, where you get when a designated quality reviewer isn't available, we can review each other's returns. Of course, you have to be certified at the same level or above that the return was prepared. Self-review is never allowed. Every return's got to be quality reviewed by a different preparer. That's a firm rule. So what are some of the steps that we're going to go through when we're doing quality review? So during this process, we have to also verify the social security number and photo ID. Usually when I'm the preparer and I first sit down with the clients that are being there, they pull out their social security card and ID, and I tell them, keep these handy. Don't put them back in your wallet, because the quality reviewer is going to want to check that again. So we want to make sure that the return is done that within the scope of the program, that the preparer was certified up to that level and that we didn't do things that were out of scope. We verify all the applicable questions on the intake and interview form, pages 1 through 3, that, you know, uh, in the new form that we're using, they're not all answered. We tell the client, check the boxes that apply to you. But on the right side of the form, we're going through and we're asking the client, we're confirming some things. They marked that they had wages and they provided one W-2. Is that the only job that you had? Because sometimes they forget, oh yeah, I did work at this place for 2 weeks. And I don't remember getting a W-2 from them. Well, we need to stop it right there and make sure we get the W-2s. And sometimes the preparer hasn't done that. If they have, they've marked over there on the site that they checked and they wrote in the number of W-2s, the number of jobs that they had. That's what we're looking for. We want to make sure that all of, and especially the questions where the taxpayer has kind of marked something, they marked some comment, we definitely want to go over those with them. Or anything that's questionable, especially when they have Schedule Cs. They were a Lyft or an Uber driver. We want to make sure that we've noted all of the particulars on this form. Or maybe they've got education expenses. We want to make notes on this form, and the quality reviewer, we're going to go over these and we're going to discuss them with the taxpayer again and correct them if necessary. Again, I've kind of beat this to the ground now about all that gray shaded area of the 13614 is completed, and that we look for any additional comments that the preparer has made on there and go over them again with the taxpayer. We want to make sure that the names, addresses, social security numbers or ITINs, and employer identification numbers are verified and correct on the return. And this may seem like a no-brainer to you, but it's not. We want to make sure the filing status is correct. When the preparer opens up that return and they're sitting there with an individual who's maybe got dependents, usually we try to tell the preparers, go through the whole interview process before you start the return for a variety of reasons. One is if we can't do the return and we've got to send them away, we haven't waited till we're almost done with the return and then figured out that, oh, hey, you're going to have to come back. We let them know as soon as possible if we're missing some information. But again, I could give you an example. If the preparer just starts the return up, they verify the social security number, name and address and start putting it up. They get to the basic information screen. They're sitting there with a single person and they just mark single. But then when we get into the interview, we realize, oh, they've got dependents. Oh, well, maybe they're still married, but we can claim them as head of household. Or maybe we thought they were single, but then we realize, hey, they're really head of household. So this is where, the filing status can be really critical on this, that we make sure it's correct. Make sure that the dependency determinations are correct. Dependency is not a choice. You can't just decide, well, in some examples they can be. The custodial parent could give up the dependency exemption to the other spouse, but in general, it's not a choice. It's facts and circumstances that determine who gets to claim the dependent. This is particularly important for a student who's away at college. If they're only away at college for the time, that's a temporary absence. If they're living with the parents and the parents are and the student didn't provide more than half of their own support, well, the student can't claim themselves. They're a dependent of the parent. It's facts and circumstances that determine that. So we want to really go over that and be sure. We want to make sure that all income is documented, even if they don't have a source document like a 1099. If they had a job, and in the course of the interview, hey, did you have any income from any place else? Well, yeah, I did a little side job for somebody, but they told me they didn't have to give me a 1099 because I only made $400. Well, we can't ignore that. that we have to claim that income. And we want to confirm, you're the quality reviewer, we want to confirm that this is correct, that the preparer didn't just skip over something. Okay. We want to make sure that all adjustments to income are verified and correct. This is going to be particularly important now in 2025 with the new tax act that was where tips and overtime are are not taxable. And the IRS has already told us that they're not going to redo the Form W-2 for 2025. They're relying on employers to issue statements to these employees. We want to make sure that either we're taking the standard deduction or if they're itemizing that those are correct. And we especially want to make sure we get all the eligible credits that are there. Now, the Affordable Care Act. This is one of the big, I said earlier in this presentation, it's one of the biggest reasons we get rejects. Sometimes these taxpayers, they don't even realize that they're getting insurance through the Affordable Care Act. But when you kind of quiz them on it, well, I see you're not getting coverage through your employer. How did you get this insurance? Well, yeah, I got it through my broker, right? He took care of all that. Well, they don't realize that the broker has gone through and gotten them coverage under the Affordable Care Act through the marketplace. And maybe they got these forms in the mail and didn't understand what they were and just tossed them. So we need to really drill down as to make sure that they're getting it. We need to make sure the withholding and estimated tax payments are correct. We double check, triple check the debit and the routing numbers and the account numbers are correct. And this year, we're really trying to encourage folks to use that direct deposit because if they ask for a check, it's going to take them months to get that refund if they ask for IRS to mail them a check. We want to make sure that the return types are correct. We're trying to e-file everything, but sometimes we're just required a paper return that we have to do that. And then we also want to make sure that during the quality review that the taxpayer was advised that they are responsible for information on the return. When I'm doing the training sessions, I tell the preparers usually I think most of the clients that I deal with, they've been told like 3 times before they leave the site. And at the very end, when we talk about this quality review, they're going to be signing that 8863 that is permission to e-file the return. And it's that big old paragraph that's saying they're responsible for what's on the return. I want to make sure that they understand that we've just put in what they gave us, right? So we're going to, usually select the quality review print set when the return, when we're going to review the return. And as I said, I bring up that PDF. Let me back up just a second. And I try to teach this even to the preparers when they're preparing a return. I try to tell them, look, when you get all of these documents and you start entering it in there, try to be building a vision in your mind of what that return is going to look like, especially like page 1 and page 2 of the return. Be thinking about that. So when you get all done, print up a PDF and go through the actual return and say, does this make sense to you based on all of the stuff you've been inputting, right? So when I go to review a return, I'm reviewing it from the top down. I've looked at the interview, conducted this interview with the taxpayer. I've looked at the intake and interview form. I've looked at all the forms. And then now I've kind of built this image of what the return should look like. And I'm reviewing it from the top down. I print up this return and then I review it from that. I review it from this print set, right? And then I'm comparing it from this print set. I'll show you in a minute how I verify that the numbers are correct on the forms that were input onto this. So here's in TaxSlayer, you can, without even entering the return, you can just go find the client, and then you can say, hey, print a quality review return from there. So we review the basic intake and interview documents. We review it. Um, we make sure we've got all the forms and the schedules that are correct. And then after we've reviewed this return with the taxpayer, we're going to mark it as complete. Okay, that's the cue for the site coordinator to transmit the return. At least in my sites, not the site, the site coordinator is also the person who transmits the returns, but not the reviewer is going to mark it complete. That's the signal to the site coordinator that they can transmit the return. Um, so I said a moment ago the 8863, I meant the 8879. That's the transmittal form that the taxpayer is going to sign. And that's the very last step in the process. After I review the return from a PDF in case that there has to be any changes, but then I print out the return and then I go over that with the taxpayers to make sure that they understand it. And that's when they sign the 8879. So this is on usually the preparer should have marked the tax return ready for review. That puts it in the review queue. Then you as a quality reviewer, after you've reviewed the return, you're going to mark it as complete for doing here. So, and this is, the exit interview is kind of what I just described. I go ahead and print out the return, and this is where I'm going over it with the taxpayer. I've been going over it with the PDF. If I can turn the screen towards them, I'm involving them in the review of this return. In case just some little things cue the taxpayer's memory, the client's memory about something. But then I print out the return and then I go over it with the taxpayer. And then I have them verify it and sign it. And I tell them, look, you're responsible for everything on the return. We just put in what you gave us. And what you're signing here is you're signing that you have reviewed this return and that you're responsible and you're giving us permission to file it electronically. And then we put it on the envelope. We have that envelope that we put their copy of the return in. If there's some notes that are important, we write them right on the envelope. Hey, if they have to make a payment, here, make sure you make the payment. I write that on the outside of the envelope. Um, what are some other things? Sometimes I'll put notes right on the outside of the envelope. Oh, maybe they've got a carry forward from Schedule D. I'll write that right on the outside of the envelope. And then I emphasize, bring this back with you next year so that we can follow up on these things. Um, check every print page that's at the printer. We printed this out. Sometimes we're working in like public libraries, right? And we send it to the printer. Get to the printer so that somebody else isn't grabbing something off of it. We want to make sure that the printer didn't run out of paper and that there's still a few more forms. These are security things that we want to make sure that somebody doesn't grab something that's got that client's social security number on it. We want to keep it confidential. We want to ask if the taxpayers got any questions. I've been reviewing this return with them. Want to make sure that they understand it. Here's the other thing about the bank account information. Some will actually have the taxpayer initial the bank account information that's on the form. On the federal return, it doesn't really print out that information. It's all X'd out. But the state form usually prints out that information. And so some site coordinators want the client to initial it. We certainly want them to kind of confirm it, like 2 or 3 times we do that. And then we have them sign the 8879. Now, different sites will have different policies. On all of my sites, and more, I think we're all getting towards this. All documents get returned to the taxpayer. We put them in that envelope. Even if they have to return, we give them back their documents. We don't keep anything at the site. Some sites will have a drop-off process, and so they do have to keep documents at the site, but there should be a process. Usually it's where the site coordinator's guarding all of that information too. Okay, so as long as we do a really good process through this, it results in accurate returns. Okay. Um, SPEC, that's the IRS division that runs these VITA sites. It's oh, I never remember the acronym that's gonna never mind. I don't remember the acronym that SPEC. It's education and communication. It's nevertheless. Um, we have a very good when spec comes in to review returns, right? We have a very good accuracy. Sometimes they just do remote reviews. We have a 97% return accuracy. Sometimes they do a field site visit and they actually pull a return right then and there and review it to make sure we did it. And there we do even better. We've got a 99% accuracy rate. So now we're going to practice doing a quality review. Now, as I said, and this I attribute to one of my site coordinators, he said it the other day that quality review is more an art than a science. You know, we went over some basic tips in this. Now I'm going to do a review the way I do them. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do a quality review, but at least I'm covering all the basics of what I've done. So I'm going to stop sharing this presentation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a 2024 return that we did that was done and where I actually did the return. And so you can go back now in this video, I've put links to the pages of the 2024 scenarios. I can't do 2025 because if other people are watching this and they haven't taken the 25 certification yet, you know, I would be giving away stuff. So instead, I'm using the 2024 test booklet. This was Advanced Scenario 7, Vincent and Faith Hunter. So we're in our live presentation, Gene and I, we kind of did this where I was the quality reviewer and he was the client, Vincent Hunter, and we did this interchange that I would normally do. Instead, this time I'm just going to describe how I'm doing this. So we're using all the documents that came from this Advanced Scenario 7, and in a moment, I'm going to show you the actual return that's done. But first, you know, here I'm going to go over these documents. And these are the interview notes. These are notes that were done, you know, that were given that the preparer had drawn out of this, that Vincent was a fifth grade teacher at a public school. Let me make this a little bigger. So maybe it's a little easier to see on this here. Okay, so he's a fifth grade teacher. So right away, now as I told you, as I started looking at these things, I'm building an image of what this return is going to look like, the actual return that we're going to file, right? So I see he's a fifth grade teacher. I'm going to make sure that, hey, does he have some education expenses? And yeah, down on this next, and it tells us that Vince and Faith are married. They choose to do married filing jointly. So I don't, no issues there. You know, it's a married filing joint return. But here's where, you know, it gives us that Vincent worked a total of 1,800 hours in 2024. So yeah, okay, I know he's worked more than 900. If he's got some expenses, yeah, there it is. He spent $844 on unreimbursed classified expenses. So I'm expecting that Schedule 1, under page 2, there's adjustments, that there's going to be expenses. I'm thinking it's $250 is the max allowed. But again, I am constantly checking myself to make sure that we get this. But so anyway, I'm looking for that. Now it says Faith retired in 2021 and began receiving her pension on November 1st of that year. She explains that this is a joint and survivor annuity. Okay, so right away, I'm thinking I need to make sure probably not all of that annuity is taxable. There may be a portion where, and this next sum, she's recovered $1,259 of the cost of the plan. I'm expecting on the form to see where there were employee contributions, and I need to make sure that the preparer has either using the tool within TaxSlayer, right, to where they're the simplified method that they've either done that, or else they've gone out to the Colorado tax aid tools and using that tool, to calculate the taxable portion of the plan. Okay, and then it says Vincent settled with his credit card company on an outstanding bill and brought a Form 1099-C to the site. So again, now I'm going to be looking on that Schedule 1. There should be some additional income from discharge of an indebtedness too. Then it says Faith received $280 from jury duty. Well, we should know as quality reviewers that that is taxable. We should see that again on Schedule 1 that then flows through to the page 2 of page 1 of the tax return. Okay, so what's next? Their daughter Hope is in her second year of college pursuing a bachelor's degree in physics at a qualified educational institution. So there I'm thinking that we've got some education credits here. So it says she received a scholarship. The terms so the terms require that it be used to pay tuition. So I know I'm not going to be able to use this this scholarship. We have to use it to offset tuition. Okay, so I won't be able to do any fancy things about, oh, hey, can we use that scholarship to and claim it as income on Hope's return so we can increase the education credits. No, this is a restricted scholarship. Has to be used to offset tuition. They provided us with Form 1098-T and an account statement. I always require this account statement from the college because the 1098-T doesn't always capture all these expenses. And it says that this account statement included some additional expenses. Okay? Hunter's paid $1,500 for books and equipment related to her courses. Okay? The information is found on that college statement of account. And so it says that the Hunters claimed the American Opportunity Credit last year for the first time. That's telling me right now, okay, she's got 4 times, so she's still eligible for this American Opportunity Credit, at least so far. And then it says Hope does not have a felony drug conviction. That's important for the American Opportunity Credit. And then here's their Social Security cards. Okay, good. So now I've got all of this stuff. And then now we've got the 13614C. And if I want to, I'm not sure how this is coming out on the thing, but as we know, this is their intake and interview form that has all of their address and phone number and everything here. It's got the information about their daughter. So it says number of months lived in your home, 12 months, that's good. Single. How old is she? Date of birth, 2005. So this means that at the end of 25, she was 20 years old. So she's over 17 or over 19 rather. But so we want to make sure, is she a full-time student? Yeah, okay, good. She's a full-time student. I think we've already determined that. So that means that even if she was away at college, that's a temporary absence. It's deemed that she's lived with her parents. It's her parents have to claim her as a dependent, and then they're the ones who would get the American Opportunity Credit. And so I want to make sure that this gray area is filled out, that she is a qualifying child dependent. Why? She's over 19. She's between 19 and 24, but she was a full-time student. And Faith, I want to make sure that Faith didn't provide more than half of her own support. Okay, so here are the forms. Now, if I was looking at this from the preparer form, I don't see anything done here over on the gray side, And so I want to make sure that I've at least looked at these things and the relevant information is doing this. So as I'm interviewing Vincent or Faith, I want to make sure that, hey, there was only one W-2. I mean, I saw only one W-2. But oh, okay, so Faith didn't work a part-time job. Okay, no, good. You know, tips, with this, would I really want to do this? No, he's an educator. I'm not going to ask him about that. Oh, hey, there was a 1099-R. Well, was there only one? Okay, so I'm going to want to check this off and make sure that these things are all. Oh, got Social Security. Well, were both entitled to Social Security? No. Okay, it was just Faith that got Social Security, but want to make sure that, hey, Vincent didn't claim it early. I'm not even sure how old he was. I'd have to go up there and look at his age. But so do you see, I'm not going to go through everything, but here I'm going to want to go down through this list and I'm checking these off, okay, to make sure that I've either asked them about them or they're not applicable, right? Um, did they itemize last year? Hopefully, I've got their last year's tax return. Over 90% of folks are taking the standard deduction these days. And if they took the standard deduction, I don't really even care about the tax refund, right? Okay. They didn't mark any interest or dividends. When I go down through all of this, I'm going to say, look, okay, did you have any income from any other source, right? Somewhere on here, I should have seen that they had income from jury. Didn't she have jury duty that should have been marked here? Um, I forget what was up in the interview, but I'm going to make sure that all of these things that I'm going to have a discussion with them. Okay. Okay, so that's the intake and interview form. I'm going through with them and making sure that this is all correct. Now I'm going to go back and let me reverse these things here. Now I've got the W-2s. So how am I going to make sure that these are correct? Am I going to go into the tax layer and into the W-2 forms and then go check these? No, I'm not going to do it that way. Let's go take a look at the return that I've printed out here. Okay, this first one here is like an invoice. There's no invoice for this. But here I get into this form right here. This right here allows me to check a lot of things. Okay, first of all, it allows me to check that their social security numbers were entered in properly, right? I'm definitely going to look at their social security cards, make sure that those are done. I'm going to make sure that their birth dates are right. Okay, I'm going to go confirm those back on the intake and interview form. A minute ago, I wasn't even sure if Vince could have taken Social Security early. No, he didn't. But it looks like Faith is old enough and she's taking Social Security. I can check their address from this form. I can check their phone number. Phone number is really important because if this return gets rejected, they're gone. Preparers are, well, may or may not be gone, but the site coordinator is going to have to call them back to make sure. So we want to make sure that this phone number is correct, right? Here's where we can check Hope, the daughter's. We're going to have her social security number. We want to check her birth date. And this is telling us whether how she's claimed as a dependent. Okay, so now I go down here and here's one place you could, here's the W-2 forms. I like the facsimiles that TaxSlayer prints. So I'm gonna, of course, there is no facsimile. Usually here's where I'm checking the SSA 1099. I've got that SSA 1099 and I want to make sure that we've claimed the Social Security benefits and the Medicare premiums and federal withholding. Oh boy, that gets missed a lot, especially on Social Security forms, because you don't usually see them often on Social Security forms. So this is where I'm checking that. But then the for the W-2s and 1099s, I'm usually going down to this form right here. And I'm going to go compare this form with these forms that was on their source documents. And I can compare box 1, box 5, make sure all the withholding is correct, make sure that these things are correct, D, and make sure the retirement plan is correct. So I have this form to make sure that everything was put in there just correctly. Same thing with down under here, I've got the 1099-R Now, here I'm going to see here that TaxSlayer has calculated that there was a gross distribution and it calculated the taxable amount. Okay, how am I going to confirm that that's correct? So this is probably one instance where I'm going to actually want to go into TaxSlayer and make sure that they've answered those questions correct, that it was a joint and survivor's annuity, that they had recovered so much previously. That was given to us in the information there, how much was recovered. And so I'm going to probably want to go in there unless if they used the Colorado Tax Aid tool and they printed out how much is recoverable each year, then I'm going to know I've got something that tells me that this is the correct taxable amount. Because if I go back over here and I look at this is the form that they gave us, right? It doesn't tell me what the taxable amount is. It says the taxable amount wasn't determined. It does tell us that there was some Social Security withheld here. But really what's important is here, these were the taxpayer contributions right here in box 9B. So I want to make sure that we've put that in correctly. And the only way I can do it is I'm going to have to go back into TaxSlayer, go into that simplified method form and make sure we've answered all the questions. How old were they when they started taking distributions? That was like November 1st of, I forget what year it was, but I'm going to have to go review and make sure that that's correct. And so I have on this one, I've made sure that that's correct. Um, I've made sure that there weren't any interest or dividends. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to review the form. This is the 8879 that they're going to sign. And when I get done reviewing this with them, I don't usually say under penalties of perjury. I've heard some people say that. But what I do is I say, look, here's what all this fine print is saying. It's saying that you're responsible for everything on the return, that we just put in what you gave us, and that it also is saying there that you're giving us permission to file this return electronically for you. And they're going to sign it right here. Both spouses are going to sign it here and here. So now I've got page one of the return, right? So yeah, we've got Hope. Yeah, made sure that it's married filing jointly. We've got Hope, they're dependent, right? Okay, well, why aren't they getting the child tax credit? Because Hope is over 17. So, but we do get a credit for other dependents here. So I'm going to be looking on page 2 to make sure that that came through correctly. So here now I've already confirmed from the W-2 that this should be correct. Okay, so here we've got pensions and annuities, 20,100. Yeah, I confirmed that was correct. I went into TaxSlayer and made sure that they reported the correct taxable amount. Okay. We put in Faith's Social Security. I confirmed that that was correct. Now, TaxSlayer calculated the taxable amount. There's a worksheet that goes with this. I'm relying on TaxSlayer to properly do that. Okay, so where's this additional income coming from? Now, I remember when I was reviewing this that, hey, there was, I think it was some jury duty or there was some prize that she won. And then also there was forgiveness of debt. So let's go look at Schedule 1. I'm going to scroll on down here to Schedule 1 and see what we've got on here. So here's additional income. Yeah, there's that cancellation of debt, 850, and there's that jury duty. Yeah, sure enough. Okay, there's the 1130. So that came through up here. There we go. That 1130 came through. So then we've got total income. Oh, adjustments to income. Yeah, there was some educator expenses. I was thinking it was 250, but we input all of the preparer input all of their education expenses. And I'm going to go down here to Schedule 1 again onto the second page. Yeah, sure enough, here was the educator expenses. It caps out at 300. So that's how I made sure. And I'm going to explain this to the taxpayer. Yeah, you had $800 of expenses, but they only allow you to take 300. So that was that 300. So now we're down to adjusted gross income. And it looks like they're taking the standard deduction. Now, if I look at my 4012, there's something odd about this. Yeah, one of the taxpayers is over 65. They got that additional standard deduction on there. But so this is correct. Now, so it's calculated the tax. Oh, here's our credit for other dependents, right? Okay, good. So now, and then now it says that there's an amount from Schedule 3, line 8. Well, let's go look at that. I'm thinking that that's going to be the the non-refundable portion of the American Opportunity Credit. And before I go there, because we're gonna have to go look at that form. Yeah, sure enough, down here I see there's the 1,000 that's the refundable portion. So they're getting the whole 2,500. So I want to go look at that education credit form. Let's make sure it's filled out right. So um, education credits. Okay. So after completing part 3 for each student, so let's go down here to part 3, right? You know, here's part 3. Yeah, we got Hope Hunter. We've put in all of these things. We've made sure, and by the way, these are just the questions that were answered in TaxSlayer. Now, let's go back and look at the source documents for that. Because okay, here was the source document um, for Faith for her Social Security, and we confirmed on in TaxSlayer that 2390 withholding was there. Here was the cancellation of debt. Here's the tuition statement. Okay, so what happens here? So we've got payments received for qualified tuition, 5722. And we were told that 3202 was scholarships or grants that had to be offset against this tuition. So if I do a little bit of math here, what have I got left here? Looks like I've got $2,520 of tuition that's left. Okay, if you get out your calculator, you can do that. This is also done in TaxSlayer. You know, you put there. Okay, but okay, let's see. We want to go look at this account statement right down here. Okay, so there's the tuition. There's the scholarship that was taken off. Oh, we've got these extra $1,500 of expenses. So when I take this minus this and add the 1,500, now what can we do? Is this parking pass? Does this count for anything? Nah, parking pass, that's not required. You know, she can take a bus to school, it's there. So I add like 2,500 plus 1,500, it's like 4,000. I'm doing the math in my head, but it's slightly over $4,000 of expenses that are qualified educational expenses. And we can only use 4,000. So now I go back into the tax return, and yeah, sure enough, there was our maximum 4,000. And TaxSlayer's done all this calculation, says we're going to get 2,500 of credit. 1,500 is going to be the non-refundable, and then 1,000 is going to be the refundable. So now I go back up into my tax return, and we already kind of decided that this was correct. We got 1,500 up here as the non-refundable portion that offset. So here we have a total of $2,000 of non-refundable credits that reduce their tax from 5,209 down to 3,209. Okay. Now, I already confirmed that we had the withholdings corrected. Let's see, 1099. I want to go back and look at that. Something tells me that I want to go check that again. I already did check it, but something tells me that there was some more withholding. Oh, okay, nothing there, nothing there. Yeah, it says 2390 that came from here, plus from the W. Oh, there we go, right there, 2010. So there's where the 43 or $4,400 if I add them together. That's where they came from. Okay. I had already kind of confirmed that. Something just in my head told me, oh, go double check that again. Okay. So, whoops, I don't know what I just did here. I separated something out here. Okay. So there we go. Now I got it back up here. Okay, so this is all correct. That's correct. That's from the W-2, 7,600 withheld, $1,000 refundable. So we've got 8,600 of total payments. That's looking pretty good. Okay, so this is the amount they overpaid. I'm going to want to go check their routing number and account number. And then, of course, I'm going to want to check the state return. But basically now I've reviewed the whole return and it's correct. So I will have now printed it out. I would have gone over it with the taxpayer, had them sign the 8879, put their copy in the envelope, say, hey, you're ready to go. We're gonna file this electronically. If you don't hear from us, everything went through fine. Okay. If you get a phone call from the site coordinator, we may have to fix something if it doesn't go through. And voila, we are done. So we've done a whole quality review. Now, I didn't go over the state return because we may have people from different states, but basically I'm going to go through the same process on the state return. In Arizona, we may have certain credits, certain things that I'm going to want to make sure that are done correctly. And basically the same process would happen on the state return. So voila, we are finished. I hope you had some value in this, and we'll see you at our next refresher session, where I think we're going to go over education credits. Okay, bye-bye.